Okay, we've got everybody. I think we've got our room loaded now. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dean Hanks. I'm the Vice President of Development here at Bellarmine Prep. And we're really excited to have you join us this evening. We have a really entertaining, I think, evening for you. We have three of our wonderful alums who have been active in the entertainment field. And you're going to hear from them their own stories of their journey and how Bellarmine influenced that, how it affected them, and where they are today. We're going to leave hopefully plenty of time for you if you have comments or questions or anything you would like to hear from the participants. And we plan to wrap up right around 7 o'clock. But with all things Bellarmine, we're going to start off their evening, as we always do, with a prayer. And we're very grateful to have the superior of the Jesuit community here at Bellarmine, Father Nat Jono, offer our evening prayer. Father?
Thanks, Dean. Maybe we can just gather ourselves from wherever we've been and to take a moment to place ourselves in this space of the, the internet, but also just the space of being a community together. Put away those things that have been on our minds, the things that are still left to do. Find that peace, that place of peace. One of the foundational sayings that Ignatius of Loyola, and part of the aspect of Jesuit education, is to find God in all things. And I think that especially this evening, we're just really blessed, I think, to have three people who have found God in a very special area of their lives. And I think it gives them joy to be able to find that. It may have been a sort of circuitous kind of a journey, but here they are. So let's take a moment to just be part of that. And I think, again, another aspect of Jesuit education is to be able to find that freedom of being able to choose. And I think that, again, these three have been able to choose the direction of their lives. So let's take a moment to pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good and gracious God, you are the one who is the source of all that we do and are. And you give us many choices in our lives, but you don't lead us where the grace of God will not carry us. So help us. Help us in this evening. Be with both Aaron, Maureen, and Austin as they talk about their lives and the choices that they have made. Continue to give them the grace and the freedom that you give to all, that they may continue to be men and women for others. We ask your prayer this evening that you help us to be able to be open to the graces that you give us. We ask all of these things in your name, Jesus the Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Thank you, Father Nat. We appreciate it very much. So without further ado, we'll jump in with our participants. Our first speaker this evening is Maureen Trantham. Maureen's a Bellarmine 2003 alum. She's had a really interesting career. She's currently the Vice President of Operations for Sesame Workshop, but she's also worked in newspapers in China and Thailand and done a lot of journalism work and other things. I think she's a Renaissance woman. She's done lots of really interesting things. So she does have a BA in journalism from University of Washington, an MBA from NYU. And so without further ado, we'll turn it over to Maureen to get things going. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Dean Hanks. Thanks for having me. And I hope I can live up to this Renaissance woman reputation you've built up for me. I'll start by talking a little bit about sort of, myself and my time at Bellarmine, and then we can talk a little bit about my journey. I'll just start by saying that, I've always been a deeply spiritual person, but many of the central tenets, I think, as I was reflecting about this night, of my own faith and identity were shaped by my Jesuit education at Bellarmine. And it was really here, right, assuming that we were in the building tonight, that my interest in problem solving and social justice were really sparked, as well as my desire to use my talents for good. And as I kind of reflected on my time at Bellarmine and like the years since, I kept coming back to, it was a quote by one of my favorite writers, Joan Didion, who said, I think we are well advised to keep on nodding terms with the people we used to be, whether we find them attractive company or not. And so what that means to me is, would the 16-year-old Marine who walked the halls of the A building actually respect the 26 or even the 36-year-old Marine in Brooklyn? Or, instead of nodding, would she just shake her head? And that's been a really, really good internal compass for me throughout my career. And during my time at Bellarmine, I spent a lot of time really experimenting and exploring. I participated in theater and photography in the Lion newspaper and the Literary Arts Review Lionize, which Aaron also co-edited. Actually, he was the editor. Aaron will talk about it. We spent a lot of time together. But this was pretty much code for the fact that I was a pretty extreme English nerd. But thankfully, I had teachers like Mr. Berg and Mrs. Wood and Mr. Plouffe and Mr. Wilkinson that really encouraged me to pursue my passions and probably indulged me a little too. They really pushed me to think critically and answer my own hard questions, but also just do more than was assigned. This meant really in practicality that I spent an absurd amount of time reading Shakespeare and also a frightening amount of time reading Foucault for a 16-year-old. And at the same time, I also participated in lectures with Mr. Keller Scholes, which was like more than good just public speaking experience. The lecture meetings, as I recall, really served as a forum for me and others to discuss and debate and connect scripture to modern issues of social justice and moral responsibility. At the time, connecting our faith to current events really felt, and frankly still feels, really imperative, particularly because Aaron and I were at school for 9/11 and the beginning of the Iraq War. And these were two events I really struggled deeply with. Like, I struggled with 9/11 and the war's justifications, thinking back about my time at Bellarmine, but the encouragement from multiple teachers to speak out, engage in activism, and even a few protests at the time really felt empowering and validating. I graduated really wanting to become, really didn't know what I wanted to become. I wanted to become something between a female Hunter S. Thompson and a punk rock executive, if such a career existed. But mostly I wanted freedom. I wanted freedom, independence, travel, and the ability to seek deeper answers to some of the central questions my time at Bellarmine raised. So that, combined with my passion for writing, led me to study journalism and comparative history at the University of Washington. Unfortunately, even though I had 2 short stints reporting for international newspapers in Thailand and China, I graduated at exactly the wrong time. It was 2007, and newspapers were dying a not so slow death in the US. This was before digital, and this was also right before the Great Recession. Fortunately, I actually realized I didn't love reporting on events. I wanted to influence them. Media, as I realized, has great power, but reporting on social issues just made me feel like still a bystander. I wanted to use my talents to actually help solve the social problems I cared about, like economic opportunity and gender equality. These were the issues that at Bellarmine really rose to the forefront for me in multiple classes, whether it was world history or whether it was social justice with Mrs. Kowatz. This led me to work in communications for a Washington State education policy and advocacy nonprofit. I helped lead statewide campaigns for higher graduation requirements, improvements in STEM, and charter schools. I also rallied coalitions, testified in Olympia, and worked on bills. During the recession, when so many of our country's structural inequities were exposed, this work felt like the natural intersection between my skills and desire to drive social change. But the progress was really slow, and the politics and bureaucracy started to feel really toxic. Looking back on nodding terms, I was really restless, and I was ambitious, and I craved the ability to influence and drive change on a faster, broader scale, which is what drove me ultimately to go to business school in New York. And as I thought about that, and being in the entertainment industry, discussion, I feel like this is like the record scratch freeze frame moment. Like this is when Rod Howard comes in and says, "You're probably wondering how this girl got here." And you can probably do that again when I tell you that I spent 6 years afterwards working for a big management consulting firm advising media, entertainment, and tech companies. I just can't skip over this period because it's probably the most central, critical period of my career and when the alignment between my faith and identity was tested the most. At the core, consultants are doctors for businesses. They're hired by executives to analyze and solve difficult problems. It's incredible training, and so is the ability to influence and drive change within companies. You don't own the problem, but you sit right next to, and frankly, pass notes to the CEO who does. And I was on track to make partner in a few years, but I started to feel really trapped on a hamster wheel of promotions and bonus cycles and frequent flyer mile programs. And as the years wore on, I wondered, does my work actually come at a social cost? What was my moral responsibility? And is this actually what God wants me to be doing? I asked these questions because I had advised on massive reorganizations that resulted in thousands of layoffs. And sometimes these are the right calls, but sometimes I really wondered if they were. I wanted to believe in the positive power of the market, but my gut just sank each time I ran the numbers and calculated the upside and realized just how many people would be impacted. There were clues sort of all along the way, but if I think about it, my 16-year-old self was shaking her head at how much I had sold out. I missed creativity and freedom. I had the ability to analyze, persuade, and influence, but instead of another private equity restructuring, I wanted to get back to solving the problems that I actually cared about, problems that actually improve the lives of others, as opposed to just the shareholder bottom line. So it was this sort of period of like deep reflection and frankly about 18 months of incredibly painful job searching that led me to Sesame Workshop and my current role as Vice President of Operations. Sesame Workshop, we're the nonprofit behind Sesame Street, but as I like to say to some people, we're so much more than just a show. We use the power of media to reach and teach in over 160 countries. We're developing on-the-ground education and community outreach in India, delivering content for girls to destigmatize menstrual hygiene management in sub-Saharan Africa, promoting the importance of girls' education in Afghanistan, and we're currently leading 2 of the largest early childhood interventions in the history of humanitarian response in Syria and Bangladesh. And I get to make sure that each of these efforts runs as efficiently, effectively, and sustainably as possible, using the exact tools I learned as a journalist, education advocate, and management consultant. It's really challenging. And, we're just doing so many things that frankly never have been done before, particularly during COVID. But it also feels like the most aligned my skills and desire to drive change have ever been. So I think as I thought about what's the big takeaway here, it's important to be open to change throughout your career. I've had a few, I feel like at this point, and I don't feel like I'm that old, but I think it's really important to discern along the way whether you're growing into the person you really want to be. I think we all make trade-offs along the way, and I'm, certainly not the female Hunter S. Thompson or punk rock executive my 16-year-old self probably envisioned. But I do think each stage has sort of brought me a little closer to that vision. I think Bellarmine not only put me on this incredible path, it also placed some really, really incredible people on that path with me. And that's one of the things I cherish most about the experience now, almost 20 years out. It's really the relationships I've forged with my classmates. And even though I've been out in New York for 10 years, there's really a core group of us that are still in touch and cheer each other on through weddings and babies and jobs and a set of Jesuit vows this year, and more than a few meetups at the Parkway Tavern. We've kept in touch and really kept each other honest. And harkening back to Didion, we pushed each other to stay on nodding terms with the people we used to be. You'll hear from him later, But Aaron is in fact so good at this that he roped me into this talk tonight. So if you didn't take anything away from what I had to say, you can blame it all on him. But anyway, all kidding aside, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to your questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Maureen. That was fantastic. Really fantastic. I appreciate it very much. Okay, now on to Austin Bowman. Austin is a creative executive at AGBO Films, and he's done a lot of films that you would probably recognize. One really quirky one that I love was Baby Driver, and I got that on your resume here. And there, he's worked for Working Title Films and Dylan Clark Productions. He's a graduate of USC 2015. So Austin, let's hear from you, my friend.
Mine is gonna be a lot more casual than Maureen's. Maureen's was super well thought out and very planned. I will try to do my best, but that was very beautiful, Maureen. That's great. Mine. So yeah, I was in Bellarmine class of 2011. I think when I was in school, the thing that really stood out to me the most, and it's funny, Aaron and I actually talked about this, was you guys hire amazing staff. And I think for me, admittedly, I was not a great student. I think I graduated with like a 2.8 GPA. And I also got my share of trouble from time to time. But I think the thing that really stood out is Mr. Wiley was like a great teacher for me. And he really took time out of his day, as is like a lot of teachers. And I don't think that's a common thing that happens at a lot of schools. I think it's a very unique thing that happens at Bellarmine. I don't think it was just because my mom also worked at the school and everybody knew what was going on in my life and knew that they had to do little checkups on me from time to time. But the one that, Mr. Wiley really stands out. He would pull me out of class and he would, like, whenever I was doing poorly in another class, which also means that teachers totally shared grades. I don't know if that's a kosher thing, but they did it. I'm glad they did. He'd pull me out and he would really hold me to a higher standard. And I think actually, even when I was in his class, I took honors chemistry with him. Was not a big chemistry guy, but he was such a good teacher that he really made me enthusiastic about it. And he created this positive feedback loop, which I think is like a really important thing for somebody who typically either struggles with school or is not a big fan of it. Because he really instilled this idea that if I tried really hard, I could get a good grade. And if I got a good grade, I wanted to try harder because it made me feel good about myself. And I think that positive feedback loop is something that really ingrained this confidence in me that if I tried hard in other aspects of my life, I could probably do the thing that I really wanted to do. So that stands out to me. Like when I was reflecting back on my time, but that really stands out to me because he was one of many teachers that really did that to me. Like Cindy Davis, also when I was there, did a very similar thing. And I think holding people to a higher standard and is so beneficial to kind of my path, which I think was unique, at least compared to my classmates. And I'll get into that right now, which is a lot of people at Bellarmine, I think when they graduate, they go immediately to a four-year university. I knew that because I wanted to go into entertainment, and originally it was to be a writer, and I wanted to be a novelist because I was young and I was a little pretentious, and I thought that I had the patience to write like 400-page novels that would change people's lives. Later on, realized I totally did not, but at the time I did, and I realized that I should probably be in the circle of people that do that the best. And then I think the more and more I thought about it, I realized that screenplay format might be a little bit easier than prose in a novel. And then I realized that USC was kind of the best at doing that. And so despite having like this 2.8, I thought that I would go the community college route. And so I did that. I went to Pasadena City College because my brother had gone to USC. He was graduated at the time and he was living in Pasadena. So I moved from high school when I was 18 out there, lived with my older brother, JT, went to Pasadena City College, which was extremely lonely and very boring, as community colleges are, especially when they're in Pasadena, California, which is essentially just a big suburb outside of LA. So like not a lot of like nightlife, not a big social scene at PCC. Was there, tried to get into USC, did not. Went back to PCC, applied to USC again, and at that point, I was kind of over USC. I think as a source of pride thing, like I was like, you know what, USC doesn't want me, I don't want them. I'm gonna look at other schools. Maybe I want to be a novelist again. Maybe I'll go to Berkeley. I got into Berkeley, and that's probably the most pretentious point in my life because I thought I'd go to Berkeley and become this novelist. But then luckily, USC came back like the last minute, and they're like in August, actually, and they're like, yeah, we'll let you in. And so I went, and it was amazing. And that's where I kind of met most of the people that actually really helped me get my first couple jobs. Because I'm sure, as Aaron and Maureen probably know, is that it's pretty hard to break into the entertainment industry, especially when you're from Tacoma, Washington. It's not really, I think, in the vernacular kind of growing up that that's like a thing and a path that you can take. So I think you really have to, it's because it's such a kind of a niche thing, and a lot of people that work in it are actually from the area, and a lot of it's kind of weirdly even incestuous too. Like a lot of people have family in it and so on and so forth. So went to USC, had a phenomenal time, actually majored in philosophy because I wasn't sure I'd get into the film school. And to be honest, I just kind of liked philosophy. So I majored in philosophy at USC, but then I just interned a bunch. And then one internship led to another. And I got a job at Working Title Films, which is like this small British prestige kind of company, which is kind of funny. They did like Pride and Prejudice and Love Actually and a bunch of movies that I thought I would never work for a company that made. But they also made Baby Driver, and they made Coen Brothers movies. And the thing that I really liked about what they were doing there, and it's kind of emblematic, I think, about working with the Coen Brothers, because one of them is a philosophy major and the other one's a cinema major, was they made very thoughtful, thought-provoking films. And it's what I kind of, at the end of the day, want to eventually do. I'm still very early in my career. But eventually, would like to be a part of films that I think both entertain and kind of challenge people's belief systems. And I think film has the ability to do that because it's so widely kind of consumed. But was at Working Title Films for about 2 years, and I was an assistant, which I think is very much kind of what it's stereotypically thought to be. I worked for a pretty crazy executive. I got yelled at a lot. It was pretty miserable, if I'm being completely honest. But it got better as I got older. I got another job at Dylan Clark Productions, which was on the Universal Studios lot, which was cool. It was like for the first time I felt like I was actually like a part of, like the really kind of stereotypical Hollywood system. Was there for another 2 years, was an assistant, and that company started downsizing. At this point, I've been like an assistant for 4 years, and I was kind of getting on the older end of being an assistant, and thought it wasn't really going to happen for me. And in fact, like a lot of people, it's weird, like you're in classes when you're an assistant, kind of like you are in college, and you'll see your kind of peers get promoted and elevated. And I saw everybody I worked with get promoted and move on the next level, or they like took different career paths entirely. And so I was like, at that, like, I was like, yeah, maybe I'll like go be a novelist somewhere in like rainy Seattle and kind of revert back to what I wanted to do. And then at that point is when I heard about a job opening at Agbo. And it was for these guys, Joe and Anthony Rousseau, which I'd heard that, I knew that they directed the Avengers movies, which I was kind of off-put about because I was like, yeah, like Marvel movies are cool. I don't know if it's like the art house cinema, that I want to do, and my pretentious kind of Berkeley old mindset. But it was cool. And actually, when I interviewed for them, they had a lot of really smart things to say. And they were doing a lot of different types of movies. So I joined their company 2 years ago. It feels like shorter because a year of that has been like this. It's been on Zoom, which is odd and frustrating. And I can't wait to be back in the office. But, and then so I got promoted to an executive about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And ever since then, I've been just doing what I do now, which I think can be kind of best explained as like a producer is it's a weird job title. I'm still kind of learning what it is because it's so broad. I worked for this guy at Working Title Films, and he said producing is like herding cats. I would one up that, and I would say like producing is like herding cats that like want to be dogs. Like everybody that we work with, I think secretly kind of wants to do a different part of the industry, except like screenwriters. Like I think Aaron is like, he's just like, yeah, I like to write, which is just delightful to hear because you work with directors and they like for sure want to be screenwriters. I think producers for sure want to be directors. I think studio people for sure want to be like everything. So it's like working on a bunch of different group projects all the time, and you don't get to decide who's in your group, which makes it entertaining for sure, and extremely frustrating sometimes. But what I do mostly is my job is to support people and get projects as close as possible to the green light stage where we can go and shoot them. Producers are with the project from the beginning of the project, from when we acquire the script to when we're marketing the movie and releasing it. But my job right now is support and really moving that along. So it's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of these types of things all day with writers and directors and giving notes and workshopping the script and the project to make sure that it's, as marketable for the studio for them to put millions of dollars behind it. And then the other part of my job is scouting talent. So I spend a lot of time where I spent when film festivals were a thing. I used to go there and see a lot of those movies. I still do the virtual ones, like Sundance, I think is doing a virtual one that I'll be a part of. And then it's with general meetings a lot. And that's why I met Aaron, actually, as I just knew his agent and I'd been assistants with that guy. And then, we kind of both came up together and he was like, you should meet this great writer, Aaron. I read his script, which is amazing, by the way. And I was in a meeting with Aaron and I think we were talking about the holidays and he was like, yeah, I'm from Tacoma. And I was like, no way, man, nobody's from Tacoma. And then it turns out he went to Bellarmine. And then he was like, I'm going to rope you into this Bellarmine speaker thing, which I was delighted to be a part of anyway. And so, yeah, it's location scouting. And the third part about it is I think it's very similar to any other sort of business, which is you have to manage down and up. Interns that work under us. I share an assistant with somebody else, which is not as fancy or cool as it's kind of made out to be. It's really just they help us read. They help us kind of get through all the scripts that are submitted to our company that people want to make. And yeah, that's an abrupt end, but that's my spiel. I'm sticking to it, I guess.
Perfect. Thank you, Austin. I appreciate your candor on your Bellarmine journey part. I think that was really, there's some folks here that were nodding along, Jody and Bill and others, so they probably remember your journey here. Probably helped you with that. So let's move without ado to our last presenter, someone who's been supportive of a lot of our efforts, and he was actually, you could tell that Aaron recruited both Austin and Maureen for this, so we didn't have to do anything. We just left it up to him. So we're really pleased to have Aaron. Aaron's been involved in lots of shows and lots of different things. He's a writer, as you heard, and has produced different segments and different shows. And it's always a joy to have him involved in everything we do at Bowman. So Aaron, take it away, my friend.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this tonight. We appreciate you showing up. And it's fun to see some familiar faces on the Zoom. It's actually impossible, I think, to tell my story to and through the entertainment industry without mentioning Bellarmine, because I think in many ways it's responsible for a lot of my interest in it and me seeing it as any kind of viable path. As Maureen mentioned, there'll be some overlap. We were in the same class and a lot of the same extracurriculars, but at the near the end of my time at Bellarmine, I really thought journalism was the direction I wanted to go. It's the major I put on most of my college applications. I thought that's really what I wanted to do, being involved in the Lion. But there was always this part of me that always really loved creative writing as well, but didn't really understand its possibility or potential as a career, even though I had watched movies religiously and in every TV show and had a subscription to Entertainment Weekly since I was like 11. So I knew I loved the business, but I didn't really know how I could make a way into it. But a couple things happened. One was that my senior year, which is now Father Perry Petridge, started a one-act play festival at Bellarmine, which I think might still be going, probably not this year, but my senior year, I got to write a play for it, and writing that play kind of opened up a new interest inside me that I didn't know was there, that I thought was really exciting and fulfilling. And then while I was touring USC for the journalism school, they also showed off the film school and talked about the screenwriting program. And I thought, well, maybe I should apply to that too, and went home and got a book to see what a screenplay looked like, because I'd never seen one before, and quickly filled out the application and all the various extra materials and sent that in. And through a little luck and what I'm assuming was a clerical error, they let me into the program. And when I got that acceptance letter, I couldn't turn it down. So post Bellarmine, I went and it said, screw journalism. I'm selling out and headed to movies and television, and really loved my time at USC for A couple of reasons. One is that it just was really an immersive program, the screenwriting program. I did the BFA, and you get your 10,000 hours. You have to write so much so quickly and then read everybody else's pages and give them notes. And it just really taught me how to write quickly, how to write efficiently, and it kept your creative mind alive. And it also, in some ways, it kind of allowed me to reinvent and find again that the kind of community that Bellarmine had built around me, both in terms of instructors, but also in terms of classmates. Don't get me wrong, it paled in comparison to Bellarmine, but still feeling this sense of community, of finding people with similar interests who were there to prop you up, and vice versa, where people were really invested in each other and creating a sense of mutual success and collective support. That was really valuable, and I feel like I learned how to give myself over to that, and to seek it in the first place, because I had found that at Bellarmine and had felt like it was fostered around me so well that when I got to USC, I quickly tried to find that. After graduating from USC, I knew I wanted to go right into writing, and so the writer's strike happened, and so I went into marketing for a little while. But then eventually got an assistant job, and one assistant job became another assistant job, and luckily I was eventually hired as an assistant, as a script coordinator is the name of the job, on the show Burn Notice, which I was a huge fan of when they hired me. I'd seen every episode, so I was very excited to join. And my job was to prep the scripts for production, but it also allowed me to get to see how everything worked from the inside. I got to watch these writers build the episodes and discuss all the twists and turns in the stories. And I would just sit in my office with the door open, waiting for the script, listening to them come up with episodes. And it was like going to grad school, except they were paying me to go to grad school. It was awesome. And it was so much fun. And while I was there, I wrote. I would get to the office early in the morning and spend the first hour of the day just working on my own stuff. And then I would stay late and work on my own stuff. And the writers on that show were incredible, because they would ask to read my scripts, and I would give them scripts, and they would say, okay, now go write an episode of your favorite show that's currently on the air. So then I'd go and do that, and after a little while they said, okay, you're ready. And I didn't know what that meant completely until USA picked up a show called Graceland, and they kindly and selflessly lobbied the network to staff me on it as a writer, which the network did. So I joined that show as a writer, and since then have been jumping from one show to another as a writer, sometimes in between selling my own projects, but mostly my career has been joining shows, whether they're starting out or already on the air, and helping them write episodes. Often I'll go to set and produce episodes, and being really involved in that creative process. And it's honestly, it's as fun as it sounds. It can be long nights, and it can be frustrating, and it can be draining, but it is also really rewarding, especially for those of us who find the creative process and find, like, when you touch on that great idea, that electric jolt that goes through your mind and body, you get to feel that a few times every day. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. But I think in terms of getting on my career path, I really, I give Bellarmine credit for that in many ways, but also in terms of, I think, understanding my creative self and what I seek in my work, I look at Bellarmine as responsible for a lot of that too, in terms of how it's formed. I think one of the biggest questions I ask myself, especially when I'm working on my own stuff, sometimes when you're helping write an episode of BH 90210, you just got to kind of do the job. But when you're not writing lines for Tori Spelling, you can ask yourself deeper questions, like what messages do I want to put out into the world? What stories are worth telling? What kind of empathy can I tap into in someone who might be reading this, who might ideally be watching it someday? And often I find myself specifically drawn to characters who are seeking truth. It's funny, I gave up journalism, but I find myself often writing protagonists who are journalists or detectives or even just ordinary people who are seeking a truth greater than themselves somewhere in the world. And I think a lot of that goes back to the kind of environment that Bellarmine fostered, where it asked us to both look inward in terms of accepting responsibility for what we put out into the world and wanting to put things into the world that we are both proud of, but that fosters a greater community, that fosters a sense of kindness and justice that we know that humanity is more capable of than it always gives itself to. But I also think Bellarmine asked the question, or urged us to ask the question of ourselves: what do we owe each other? And I think that often is a central question of a lot of art, not always necessarily the art that's produced in Hollywood, but sometimes. And I think those of us who are seeking to create art that has value in the world, that's also another question I ask myself a lot when I'm working on my own stuff. And honestly, a big part of Bellarmine too, I think, was just fostering a sense of openness. I think I've learned how to be much more open about my own story that you're hearing now. A big part of my story, and I'll get on touch this quickly, but right after I got staffed that first time, I was 6 weeks into my first job and then was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. I'm completely good now. I'm 7 years cancer free. But throughout that process, I wrote about the process of chemo. I wrote about the process of my surgeries. I opened myself up to it. I shared it both publicly and with the people around me, because Bellarmine had really helped me understand the value of sharing, the value of what essentially was my testimony. And I know that that's not only made me a better writer creatively, but I think it's also made me a better manager and facilitator and producer. And as a person who interfaces with a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life, who are all seeking a common creative goal, I know that openness has only made me better at my job. And honestly, I think it's made me navigate the world itself better. So I thank Bellarmine a lot for all of those aspects, both in terms of just logistically pursuing this career, but also understanding myself and what I want from it a little bit better.
Okay, how about a round of applause for our 3 participants? And so if you have, Ryan's got his hand up. Oh, he's applauding. If you have a question, you can let us know in the chat or just raise your hand, and between Melissa and I will try to figure it out, or comment, or yes, Brianna. And identify yourself too. Can you unmute Brianna Murphy? And
Hi, Brianna.
Sorry.
Brianna.
Sorry. Identify yourself and then go ahead and ask your question to our participants.
Hey, I'm Brianna. I graduated in 2006. I also work in the film industry, and I'll keep it brief because I'm sure there's a lot of people here who have really big questions for these people. But I think this does pertain to them. What are the realities, do you think, and I think this probably goes more towards Aaron and Austin, but what do you think the realities are of bringing film to the Pacific Northwest, specifically Tacoma, but also just the greater Pacific Northwest?
Aaron, do you want
I'm
to
go first? I think, film and television are very different in the sense that, so film, I think always, especially independent film, is always going to be seeking out authentic locations and places that can really help sell environments. I think television, unfortunately, is kind of stuck in the locations that tend to have the infrastructure already there for it, because there's no such thing as non-studio television. There's always a studio force behind television shows. but films can be financed independently. I think right now there's been Portland actually, in terms of cities in the Pacific Northwest, has been the most amenable to production. I know that there's a few shows that have shot there, and Portland has had a number of independent films each year shot there as well. I would love to see Seattle have a bigger film scene. I honestly don't know I don't know whether it's tax reasons or just a lack of infrastructure in terms of getting great crew people or what. But I think Seattle's probably a little bit of literally in a tough place, because Vancouver right above it has tons of infrastructure and tons of people, and Portland right below it has tons of infrastructure and people. And I think a lot of people who want that Pacific Northwest look for their film tend to go to one of those locations simply because there's already a ton of great crew people there and the infrastructure. But I don't know that that's, I know that's a diagnosing the problem in terms of what the future holds. I think the more that it might be as simple as someone making that great film that uses Seattle as that makes Seattle a central character, and people suddenly want that look and feel in their films as well. It always takes one to break through, and then everybody else kind of wants to jump on that train. Might be as simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's just tax incentives is the big thing. As Aaron said, you can go up to Vancouver. Like, we're even talking about shooting a movie in the spring, and we're going to do it in Vancouver purely just because the tax incentives are good. The crew's already there. I think that if you're going to probably shoot something based in Seattle, you'd probably just send a crew out to do a couple shots of like the Space Needle and some key things, and then you'd probably shoot it in Vancouver, unfortunately. So if you want to change that, I guess you'd have to talk to like local government and get the tax incentives better. But unfortunately, until that changes, I don't see it really changing too much.
Okay, thank you. Todd got a question. Let's unmute you. There you go.
Unmute.
Go
Can you hear
ahead.
me?
Identify yourself too, who you are, and then ask your question.
All right. I'm Todd Perry. I'm from class of '88. I'm also in the film industry. I'm a visual effects supervisor, and I work in LA and Vancouver and Montreal and wherever I need to be, but I'm based in Seattle. So I mainly wanted to answer Brianna, if I can. Is that okay? Because I don't want to hijack the conversation. But Brianna, there is a small film community up in Seattle, like Austin and Aaron says. Most of it is in LA or Vancouver, especially where there are tax incentives. Georgia is another big one. But if you hunt them out, they're there. Like, I've shot a number of Adult Swim episodes. There was a movie called Prospect with Pablo Pascal, The Mandalorian. So he was in it. They shot that on the Olympic Peninsula, and that crew, if you start looking at the credits on those shows, you'll start to see those names move around from show to show. And one of those people is starting up a soundstage in Seattle. So some people are trying to push for that. So there's a little bit, but that tax incentive would certainly help. The state isn't really interested in that, it seems like. That was it.
Okay, thank you. Elise has a question, I think. Go ahead, Elise. We'll unmute you. There you go.
Hello. So my name is Elise Christensen. I graduated actually in '98. So I've been working on a young adult novel for a few years. And so I know, like, the traditional track, novel, how that usually works with getting to film or TV. But one of the things I got was feedback from a well-known author, and she said that I guess my instinctive writing style is more of a screenplay style. And so I was just curious, from you guys' perspective, like, I know the way to do it, like getting my novel published, doing it that way, and then trying to sell it. But is there another way, to do it, or, you know, I'm just kind of curious to hear your feedback or your ideas around that, you know, or if that's just kind of the route you'd recommend.
Yeah, I'll take it. I mean, are you asking like, do you think it's better to write a screenplay instead of the novel as far as like getting it sold?
Well, I'm just kind of wondering, like, is the way that I know to do it, which is to just publish the novel and sell it through that kind of literary agent, that style, or if there's another path that I'm not really aware of, like to be able to show it, like this could be a screenplay, you know, to show it around to other people instead of having to go that route. You know, I'm just kind of curious if that makes sense.
I'm sure Aaron has a lot of insight on this too, but I mean, I think there's a good strategy to writing it as a novel first and then selling it as a book to be adapted and then attaching yourself to adapt the book into a screenplay because you get paid twice. That's kind of like I don't mean to sound like skeezy, but that's like kind of a way to make a little bit more money from it. I mean, it's certainly a way that a lot of representatives handle kind of IP right now. But as far as what the best medium for it, I think that it kind of just depends on what the subject matter of the book that you're writing is. I think young adult does very well. There's also a self-publishing route that's been very popular, like with Amazon and a lot of that recently that I think you could go to. But yeah, I don't know, Aaron, do you have kind of 2 cents on that?
Well, what I would say just from, I'd kind of maybe like zoom out a little bit even and just say it's worth, I'd say if you can find the screenplays online, you can find all screenplays online now pretty much. But read some screenplays for some of your favorite movies and see if you like that format. And if you read that format, you're like, this is a fun style of writing. I can see myself breaking things down this way where I know how to guide a camera and then write dialogue, or also maybe read a play or two. And maybe that's actually more what the story might want to lend itself to, where it really is dialogue based and really most of the action is coming through characters speaking to each other. But I think the best kind of film school there is, even, and I'm including actual film school in this, is reading the scripts for some of your favorite films. That really, it's the way to look at the blueprints of how some of your favorite things got put together, and it'll help inform you, I think, in terms of if the story you're putting together does lend itself to this kind of writing, and if that kind of writing is also something that speaks to you. So I would start there, and then I think, you know, turn to Austin's advice for once you have that material kind of put together.
Okay, well, we have a special question from a current Bellarmine student who's interested in screenwriting. So Reagan Marsh, I don't know if you're a junior or a senior, but introduce yourself and fire away, Reagan.
So I'm Regan, I'm graduating this year and I'll be majoring in screenwriting. So I just want to know, like, what's your advice to like starting into the industry?
Relentlessness. And I think to something Austin mentioned earlier, you know, and Maureen mentioned it as well. And I think it's the thing that cannot be said enough, which is it's an industry of relationships. And the more relationships you can foster, the stronger network you have, the more you have people you can turn to, and vice versa. And that's just, it increases your opportunities for success, because you need people who are willing to read your work. You need people who are willing to meet you at Saturday at 5 a.m. to do a pickup shot for their short film that they're putting together for a festival. You need all of those people, because those are the people, that community is going to help you and you're going to help them. In the same way, like, I got my job on Burn Notice because I was working for a writer on Burn Notice. I was working for his agent, and I got the job working for his agent because someone I graduated with had worked as an assistant for that agent's best friend. And I only got that. Like, every single path I can point to is pretty much someone recommending me to someone else and saying, work with this guy or read this guy's script. And the other part of that, of course, is having the script to hand off. If all the relationships in the world are nothing if I don't have the material that can back it up. So it really is a two-pronged approach, in that I would say make the time in your life for, I'm a morning person, or that's maybe a generous assessment. I like to write in the morning. And I would make the time for myself to make sure that I got a little bit of creative work done in the day, even if it meant for, there was the year where I worked at an agency and I was working 14-hour days some days. And all of that time I was juggling phone calls, but I still made the time in the morning to get some creative work done. I would say if you can do it without burning yourself out, make the time for creative work, but also make the time to develop relationships and meet new people, because that's how you're gonna move forward. That's what a career really is built on, and that's what gives it longevity.
Austin, do you want to add anything, or did he cover it thoroughly?
He's a fantastic answer. I would only say that I think from knowing, this is not my field, but from knowing, friends of mine that are young agents and young managers, as far as, next steps in your career, I think once you're, kind of graduate from college, you're trying to get, paid to write. It's important to have a representation. And I think to get that in a lot of ways, entering competitions and getting like in the finalist categories of competitions will get you recognition from a lot of young and hungry managers and agents that are trying to represent the next Aaron Fullerton and stuff like that. So I think that that's always a good strategy too. But I can't really say enough about relationships. It's a huge thing.
I have a quick question for Maureen, and it involves that sort of last part that you shared with us. The sort of social justice based kind of work that the Sesame Workshop's doing, certainly in an international level. Are you driving that bus? I know you're in a key role. Are those choices being made on a collaborative basis at a corporate level? Or is it just part of the mission focus that Sesame Workshop has? I know they've done lots of things, and they've opened great doors to young people and dealt with very tough subjects, certainly through the years. I'm curious, how much you're applying your lessons learned way back in Bellarmine years and your life lessons to the influencing your corporate decision in an entertainment field, an entertainment, venue. So.
There's a lot in that question, Dean Hanks. No, I would say that, look, I mean, in my role, my main focus is the social impact division at Sesame Workshop. So there's the show in the US, right? But then there's also the shows globally, right? We're in a number of different countries, and the content of those shows is really tailored to the issues of the country. So in the US, Joan Gans Cooney started it over 50 years ago. Actually, the focus of the show was to educate poor urban African-American children, right? That was the focus of the show. And social justice and like the uplift of poor urban children, and really all children, has been the mission of the show all along. The mission of the organization itself is helping all children everywhere grow smarter, stronger, and kinder, right? So that's really the focus of the organization. It's always been a nonprofit. I think people think it's, they've been confused about that. One of the things I really focus on is how do we use the success commercially and otherwise we've had in the US to extend the impact of the organization and the shows globally. So how do we leverage the financial success? And I focus a lot on that of the US show and our contract with HBO, which we're blessed to have, to really make choices that, frankly, extend, whether it's doing, and we're actually planning a series in Africa right now that's focused on girls, right? So how can we leverage some of the lessons and frankly, the finances that we've been able to generate in the US to do that work in Africa and to uplift the next generation of girls? Because we know that especially during COVID, girls have been taken out of school at a much higher rate than they've been previously. So I think it's using kind of the reasoning skills and the skills I learned at Bellarmine around what's the highest and greatest use of funding, and what's the highest and greatest use of resources overall to support a human need, to support the greatest human good. And we do that everywhere. We do that in India, we do that in Bangladesh, we do that in, we're doing it in Latin America right now with the Venezuelan refugee response. I'm focused a lot on that right now, how we can marshal funding to support the migratory route that's leaving Venezuela going up through Colombia, and then really has been getting stopped at the US border. So we're really focused on marshaling resources and developing chatbots that, because they can't watch a show, right? They're on the move. These families are on the move. So how do you meet these families with content where they're at? And I think it's that creative thinking and creative use of resources. Bellarmine sort of had that spark, and I kind of kept it with me throughout my career. And it's now just an opportunity to like apply it in all the fun and impactful ways I can within the context of the organization.
Terrific. I don't want to put them on the spot, but I will. We have two of our vice principals here, Jody DeGroot and Mr. Berg, who was mentioned in there at some point. Do you want to offer a comment on any of these wonderful presenters, Jody or Bill, or say something, or ask them a question, or give them a surprise quiz maybe on something that they should have known when they took your class? Bill,
I don't want to hear anything about Tale of Two Cities.
Go ahead, Bill.
Anything.
Can we unmute Bill? He looks like he wants to say something.
Maureen and I were in Mr. Berg's English class together.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
You were in actually the English 1 class together. One of the first years teaching freshman English, if I remember correctly, Aaron. And I wouldn't say that I loathed teaching freshman English, but for some reason I had a preference for sophomores. And I will say that both Aaron and Maureen, and there were a couple of others in that class too that I remember very fondly, were exceptional students, engaged. I remember Maureen asking a question about subtext freshman year, and it's like, I'm sorry, who are you? Are you in the right class? You might need to be in Mr. Plouf's class down the hall. Wonderful, wonderful students, and I loved what you guys had to share. Austin, I don't believe I had you in class, but I knew you and I knew your family, and the one thing I love about Austin and his sibs is the smile. They've got beautiful smiles, but I love what you guys have done, and it's been, I'm honored to be invited actually tonight, which is so great. I think I've seen Aaron a couple of times since he graduated. Maureen, not as much. I'd love to see you more, but I know you're on a different coast than us. It's also, I have to say, it's really cool to see Todd Perry, class of '88. It's nice to see Amelia. I saw her there. Cameron as well. There's a lot of other people in this room that are here, I think, to celebrate what you guys have done, all three of you, and your accomplishments. And so if a Jesuit education had anything to do with your positioning, your compass, awesome. It certainly had a huge impact on me, which is why I think I remain at Bellarmine even today. So I don't have any questions. I'm so proud of all three of you. You guys have just exceeded, well, I shouldn't say you exceeded any expectations. You met, I don't want to say you're underperforming either. No, you guys have just been an incredible things. And so it's awesome to hear from you. So as you can see, I'm in my living room, or my kitchen right now. We're prepping dinner as we're talking. That's my wife. And but anyway, thank you guys so much for not only inviting me, but just for being here tonight. I loved hearing from you.
Thank you, Bill. Jody, you have a message there real quick? We'll unmute Jody, and we have two other questions we'll get to.
Hi, thank you. I am super excited to have participated as a Bellarmine alum also. I had to ask Melissa, can I get some of these emails, because I want to be a participant. I love the fact that I get to be a participant and listen to former students share their experience. And I just got to tell you, I hear a lot of Jesuit lingo in there. So you guys picked up some language, applying it to where you are, and making a difference. Maureen, the way you talk about your job, I was like, ooh, how can I get in on some of that? But maybe I'm past my prime. Anyways, Bill and I get to work together, and one of my jobs now is the professional development of our teachers. And to listen to you speak, it reminds us of the work that we continue to do to grow our teachers, because obviously our school and the relationships you had with teachers have an impact. So that's another reason why I'm here. is to bring that back to them and continue to remind ourselves, this is the gold of all the work, and I'm really proud of it all. Thank you.
Great. Shannon has, where's Shannon? There you are, Shannon Constantine. But before we have your question, we'll end with that. We learned that we have another screenwriter here that's gainfully employed, Joe Plonsky. Joe, you want to say a few words? Let's unmute Joe and have him weigh in on the screenwriting business. And what have your journey's been, Joe?
Thanks to you guys. That's very sweet of you. Yeah, it's been an interesting ride. You know, I went to NYU for film school, grad film school, actually, Notre Dame for undergrad. And actually, Stephen McFeely was in my class, you know, who wrote The Avengers, right? And then after that, ended up kind of getting more into editing when I got out to LA. So I worked on a couple features. I haven't had as much success in screenwriting as I've wanted to, probably like a lot of people. What I thought was going to be a trilogy, I've kind of turned into a series. So streaming is my new plan. So I'm got a pilot, and I decided to write the whole season, which I probably didn't need to do, but it just made sense to go for the whole story. So now I'm working on a pitch deck for that, and yeah, just very excited to, you know, get something go with Netflix, hopefully, or Hulu. My day job is as a senior producer at UCLA Athletics, which is sports, which is ironic because I remember at Bellarmine shooting football from the bleachers, you know, so it's all over, I guess, circular, but it's been a fun ride. Yeah.
What year did you graduate, Joe? What year did you graduate from Bellarmine?
87.
87. Okay. Well, thanks
Yep.
for sharing. So Shannon has a question, Shannon Constantine, and let's unmute her. And
Hey, I'm Shannon Constantine. I graduated from Bellarmine in class of 2015. I'm usually based in New York when there isn't a pandemic going on. And I guess I kind of have two questions. I'll try to keep it really quickly. First one, mostly for Maureen. What are your thoughts on the WB and HBO Max deal that's going on this year? And then just for everyone in general, like I myself right now am a coordinator at Viacom CBS in their podcasting department, but have been writing on the side. I'm repped with Paradigm right now, and I'm wondering what kind of timeline you think there is for industry buying and staffing and festivals picking up again, if things do pick up again within the next year or two.
An industry question. I love it. I love it. You know, I'll say like HBO has been a strong partner to Sesame for the last, you know, really 6 years. They actually, I mean, it's an open secret that, you know, our deal with HBO about 6 years ago actually saved Sesame Workshop from, frankly, financial destitution. And, you know, we've been really able to do a lot with that. It's been a huge platform. It's been actually incredibly successful for HBO as well. I mean, HBO, they need families, right? They need to be able to reach kids. And they were finding that they had a significant drop off once their subscribers hit childbearing age. And so Sesame really kind of saved them back. And we were really fortunate to be able to, before the pandemic, re-up on our HBO deal and be on HBO Max. Like, I mean, I think this is going to be an interesting time for us, right? I think we're lucky because during the pandemic, you know, streaming Sesame Street is sort of like more popular than ever. So in some ways we've benefited from this situation. And so is streaming overall. It's been good for us to be a part of the Warner ecosystem. I mean, I think it's kind of an open secret in the industry that we have been planning a movie. So look for that. It's not in production, but we're producing lots of other things. You know, it's going to be an interesting time. I think the question for us is how long are people going to pay for all these streaming platforms? Because frankly, they add up to the cost of cable when you really do the math. And we're cognizant of that. We're cognizant of the economics, and we're cognizant of the fact that we want to make sure we're still delivering on our mission by being on PBS, which we have been all these years. And so we're trying to work to make that, you know, expand episode availability on PBS and expand what we can put on YouTube, both in the US and internationally. I could talk about this for a very long time, but anyway, all this is to say, I think it's been good for us. I think, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how these streaming wars play out. I think HBO is really well positioned, you know, as a very strong catalog. It's probably the second strongest catalog, second only to Disney, and we feel pretty good about it.
And the second part of the question, Aaron,
I want Austin to answer first because I'm curious actually.
Do you mind?
I would benefit
sorry,
from the answer.
do you mind repeating the second part? I feel like I heard it. I just would like a refresher.
I think kind of when things will get started back up again in a real way.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of the $1 million question. I think in a lot of big ways. I think that the advent of the vaccine is really positive. I think the issue is that California is not doing too hot with COVID whatsoever right now, and that even the fact that like to make a COVID friendly set adds about 20 to 30% to your budget. And so like we're shooting a movie in a couple months that's like a $200 million movie at Netflix, and like that 20 to 30% becomes a huge number that's kind of almost unfathomable. And so we're going to probably push it even farther out just to make sure that it's a lot more reasonable. I say all that just to really say that I think 6 to 12 months is probably a good timeline to when stuff will probably start to get back to somewhat of a normal. I think that the issue is that the long-term effects of how it's kind of affected indie filmmaking in general is pretty problematic. Places that were staples like Fox Searchlight now kind of are making movies mostly for Hulu, which is kind of their parent company now, and the Disney Fox merger. I think places like A24 kind of one of the few last like making indie movies for the sake of making indie movies, because it's not really a huge money-making venture. And again, say all that to say that how that trickles down to, again, to festivals is that it's just going to be tough. It's tough because people aren't going to want to put money into these things because it's so expensive to shoot them, and because the homes that would regularly celebrate them with big checks aren't really available for a little while. I don't think it will go away. I want to be optimistic. I think people really want good movies, and they don't just want Avenger movies, even though that's good for like my company. And it's funny, Steve McFeely works at my company, so like I like talk to him on a pretty regular basis, Joe, which is kind of a funny small world moment. But yeah, I think it'll be probably like 1 to 3 years before things start to really go back to normal, before people start really putting a lot of money into really new voices. So what I would say is just to sit tight, and to what Aaron was saying earlier is like really work on your craft. And I think when the time is right, it'll be totally okay.
And to speak to the, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to move on.
And to speak more specifically just to the TV side of things too, is rooms are still going. Unfortunately, right now, look, all the rooms are Zoom rooms, and so rooms are smaller than they've ever been. A show that would normally hire 8 people to write a season is now hiring 5 people to write a season. It tends to be is kind of the new format, and I think once things return to a more in-person format, which is on the TV set in terms of just actual writers' rooms, I think we're probably looking at like the fall at the earliest, and that's when there will be more jobs. In terms of actual development and selling things, that's certainly shrunk in the last year, but it's not gone. And I think a great pitch or a great spec pilot still has cachet. It's just about aligning yourself with the right producer, getting those meetings on the books, and just knowing that it's all going to be virtual, because that's how things are going to be for a while. But I know a number of people who have been able to sell projects in the last year. They've just had to do it all on Zoom. But it certainly will be, it will certainly feel like a lot more doors are open when the industry is producing in a more regular fashion again.
And one more quick question. Kevin has a question about acting. Kevin, let's unmute you and introduce yourself, what year you graduated, and go ahead.
I'm Kevin McCarthy, graduated in 2014. So I've been an actor in Los Angeles for about 2 years now, and I was actually getting fairly decent work up until COVID hit. And so because there's not a lot of work for me to keep my skills sharp, I was wondering if any of you had any ideas how to make sure I don't get stagnant. I don't like get my skills all rusty.
There'll be other great ideas. The first thing that comes to my mind is I know there are a number of theater groups and other groups who are actually producing a lot of podcasts right now. So they're getting their actors to do a lot of voice work and doing fun, cool scripted podcasts. I just got to write one for a company and got to work with actors, and I got to work with them and directed them over Zoom, but it was all done and it was all done on an audio landscape. So that was really fun, and those opportunities are out there. Yeah, I'll let Austin and Maureen speak to some other ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think there have been some really interesting kind of innovative things that have come out of all of this. And actually, to what Aaron was saying before, to the previous question, like the pitches have changed. Like pitch videos are now like more of a thing. And I think like thinking about things in kind of that innovative way is interesting. There's like a movie that this director Rob Savage did that was, I think, almost completely on Zoom. I know that we worked with this new director that did kind of the short horror film on Zoom. So I think people are thinking about ways to do it. I think if you can kind of go about that. Personally, I don't know if I'm jumping for the bit for like a Zoom movie, but like certainly I would love to be kind of blown away by that. And if nothing else, it's great practice. But yeah, I've heard a lot about these kind of theater troupes, and I can't speak enough to how much these podcasts are growing. Like it's becoming a huge thing. Our company just purchased a whole audio division that we're going to start to do. We're going to do like these fictionalized podcasts and hire writers to write them and actors to act in them. They love to act in them because they don't have to like go through makeup or costume or anything. So I think as much as you can do that, it seems like kind of this Wild West new territory that I think is going to be pretty successful in the coming years.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Any other questions? Any last comments from any of our participants? Anything you want to leave us with? Well, I would just, Brianna had, sorry, there was another question.
I see Todd.
Todd has something to say as well. But I think, Brianna, can we unmute Todd or Brianna? I'm sorry, getting your name wrong again. I can't do it. Melissa has to do it.
Hi, I wanted to jump on real quick for the students that are still here. I work in LA. I'm a costume designer, and I've started producing stuff. And I just wanted to speak to some of the stuff that I heard everyone say about this industry being very ruthless, and it being a lot of time, long hours on set, and all of those things. And all of those things are 100% true. But if I learned anything from Bellarmine, it's that you get to be the change that you want to see in the world. And personally, I think if you are coming up in this industry, if you are a young person coming up in this industry, you get to be a part of being that change. So it means standing up for yourself about the wages that you ask for, about the time that you're going to give a project. And I think that's really, really important for young people to hear and feel empowered by that, because it doesn't totally, in my opinion, it doesn't totally have to be this way. And I think that COVID has really made a lot of people recognize that our time is very important. And so, yeah, I just kind of wanted to speak to that for the young people in the room, that like, yes, the industry is this way, but we also can change it if we would like to. And yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Todd, you wanted to offer a question or a comment? I think Todd.
Yeah, kind of a comment, and then I can tag on to Brianna's comment as well. As far as when we're getting back into production, I know that Austin gave a 20 to 30% markup for trying to shoot in COVID, and I assume that is correct. I supervise for Sony on a show called For All Mankind, and we're going back into production in March. And we shot in August under COVID restrictions. And so we were able to do it And there was actually some good that came out of it because we only shot for 10-hour days. And everyone was made to go home, and that's not always the case. Sometimes you go into 12 or 14 or 16 or 18-hour days, and that's not good for anybody. So that's a good thing that might come out of it, that producers may realize that, hey, we can actually shoot this stuff in a reasonable amount of time. I'm not holding my breath completely, but maybe. And then as far as, so there is stuff going on. That's what I was trying to get to. There are stuff that's fewer. There's less stuff going on, but there is stuff going on. So you can still poke around and you can still network with people who aren't necessarily in production right now. And fostering those relationships now is not a bad idea, because when we go back into production, I think it's going to be a fairly huge tidal wave of production that happens. Everyone's going to want to go back into production. So it's just going to be an onslaught of production work that happens. It's my own personal feeling on it. And then on Brianna's thing about staying strong and stating your needs and desires, this is a pretty good time to do it, not because of COVID, but because both the Television Academy and the Motion Picture Academy have been pushing for this diversity programs to kind of level out stuff with getting minority representation and so forth, and putting in things that allow for more opportunities. And part of that is that some production companies are starting to recognize that requiring people to do free internships is something that puts a stratification or stratifies who is eligible to get into the room and who is not, who can afford to have do a free internship for 6 months or a year. Those are the people who have some kind of support system. So that eliminates the people who don't have that support system. They're starting to recognize that. And so internships are starting to become more of a paid thing, and you have opportunities where you can actually potentially survive while you're interning in it. So it is not a bad time to be poking around in the industry for these types of jobs. That's all.
Thank you, Todd. And it was a great reminder of the way things are changing in the right direction. And let's just have a round of applause again for our 3 participants and everybody who joined in. I was so pleased we had other folks from the industry involved. This is, I think, our 3rd or 4th of this alumni conversation that we've done. I see Colonel Greg Allen over here as a board member. I think he's been in every one of them, listening in or participating. So keep an eye out. We'll push these out. There'll be other ones coming up in the months ahead. I'm deeply appreciative to Maureen and Aaron and Austin for putting yourself out there and being a part of this, and for everybody for joining us this evening. So God bless you all. Godspeed. Stay safe, everybody. And I love to see everybody's face. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Have a great night. Take care.